Hello everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Life After Loss. If this is your first time visiting, welcome. I encourage you to check out my introduction video so that you can get a sense of what we talk about here on Life After Loss. But in summary, we talk about grief and the grief experience, and we honor it one emotion at a time. For those of you returning, welcome back. I appreciate all the support and everything you guys have done for me throughout this journey. Jumping right in, I'm going to talk about this week something that I feel we can all relate to some capacity, and something that actually I was discussing with one of my partners from my Life After Loss team. That is the notion of feeling like we are leaving our loved ones behind after they pass away. So when people pass away, we tend to feel that there is actually an immediate physical separation between you and that person, right? So as time progresses, we kind of feel trapped in the whole idea of now having to move on. And what moving on actually means, for many of us, we interpret it as, kind of continuing life now without that person. And I know for me, that is something that I have struggled with the most, and it's something that I have many conflicting feelings and ideas about, because the more I spoke to people, the more I tried to understand this notion of moving on, the more I felt like I was being forced to, in essence, leave my mom in the past. It was almost as though I had to forget her experiences with me, and in essence, make a new norm, a new life now, excluding her. And that to me did not resonate well, right? So that's something that I want to talk about today, because again, as I've mentioned in my videos where I spoke about continuing connections with our loved ones, even beyond the physical realm, I spoke about the benefits of actually choosing to continue those connections and relationship with your loved ones even when they pass away. And I know for some that may sound, okay, perhaps that's a little crazy. How is that possible when someone is physically no longer here? How can you even have a relationship? And during those videos, we discuss just how possible that connection still is. Today, I wanted to focus on, again, how do we continue those relationships, but also how do we kind of let go of the traditional norms and rules of what a normal grief experience consists of. Because as we've said time and time again, there is no such thing as normal grief. There is nothing actually normal about grief, and it definitely comes up differently for every single person depending on various factors, and there's no one set of factors that is going to apply to everyone, as well as there's no one set of grief experience that everyone's going to universally experience or process. I want to bring it back to when I first started to struggle with the physical separation between my mom and I, right? So my mom died April 6, 2011 due to a sudden massive heart attack. On the actual day that we went to bury her, I literally felt like the Walking Dead, right? So I felt nothing. I felt numb. I felt like my entire world had collapsed in a matter of days. I felt like pretty hopeless at the time about how life was even going to begin to look like now that my mom was no longer physically here. And I remember having this enormous amount of grief, sadness, and frustration over the simple fact of having to leave my mom at the burial site, right? The minute the casket started to descend, I just remember feeling that like rip through my heart, because I was angry because I could not leave my mom's body there. Like, she was going to be alone. Then I started to think about how she was probably going to feel cold, how, like, in essence, I felt, as I mentioned in my previous video, that I was my mother's caregiver. I was responsible for her. I was supposed to be taking care of her. And now that she had passed away, even as she was already dead, like I felt like, no, I didn't want to leave her physically there alone. So again, that's where my struggle with the physical separation started. And it even, I think, started before that, even when, as I was communicating with the doctor that was performing the autopsy, like that night, I remember not sleeping because, again, I was just thinking about my mom and her being alone with a stranger. I know for many it may not make sense, but I remember when I actually spoke about this with a therapist, they were like, no, that's completely, that's okay to feel that way. And that's okay to start processing your grief and the loss and the separation, because in essence, it is a physical separation in that manner. And it does sound like very concrete things to worry about. But again, we all process our grief differently. People after month one, after month two, after month three, were kind of trying to push me towards that notion of moving on. And I think this is where my resentment towards it came, because it was the notion of moving on was implied as though I had to leave my mom behind. And again, I've told you guys, I was not ready to leave my mom behind. And again, I was not willing to want to leave her behind, because this was a woman that brought me into this world. This was a woman who I experienced so many things with, good, bad, and in between. This was a woman that no matter what was my mother, is my mother, will forever be my mother. And to have someone so important in my life, to have to let them go or leave them behind, was something that I just couldn't come to terms with. And this is when I tell you guys that the phrase applies: if it don't apply, let it slide. And that's a very, I guess, American a phrase. But in essence, what that phrase says is that, again, rules are going to be created by man in order to form some structure, in order to form whatever it is rules are meant to, create. That doesn't mean that those rules necessarily have to be followed by every single human being, because again, those rules may apply to you and may work for you, but they may not work for me. So I made the decision at some point in my life that no, I didn't want to leave my mom behind. No, the whole notion of having to forget her, in essence, in order for me to successfully move on from my grief experience, like there's such a thing, wasn't something that resonated with me. So I did something bold. I did something that perhaps people may think is a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I can really care less about what people think about me, about what people perceive of me, about what people think I should and should not be doing. Because at the end of the day, as I've told you guys time and time again, you guys will never satisfy all the needs and standards of society, right? So what's the use of trying to be enough for everyone else when in essence it only matters to you if you're enough for yourself, right? So again, that's when I made the decision that yes, while I was going to try to move forward and try to create a new life, I was still very much going to include my mother in it. There is nothing that has to be set in stone. What may work for you today may not work tomorrow. And it's, again, learning how to adjust, learning how to recreate, in essence, a path that works for you. So some of the ways that both actually my brothers and I have decided to keep my mother very much alive in spirit and in essence and in being. When March 22nd came around, and that was her first birthday of her not being here, it's impossible for this day to go by and for us not to celebrate and honor her, even though she was not physically here. So what we did was, I was living in Georgia at the time. I don't know why I'm pointing here because I'm not in Georgia. I'm in Hong Kong actually, but in Georgia. I was living in Georgia. My brothers were both living in New York, and we were trying to come up with an idea of how can we let our mom know how we're feeling about her. We came up with the idea of the balloon message, right? For those that personally know me, I detest balloons. I am terrified of balloons. So, whatever, if ever there's a time where Lindsay and balloons are involved, I'm really trying. But I knew that for that moment, that is what I needed in order to get my message across to her. So what we three individually did, we bought balloons and we got like a little piece of paper, posted, whatever you want to call it, and we wrote a message to her. It was a birthday message, and the symbolic meaning behind the balloon was that we were going to tie the message to the balloon and then release it at the same time, so that in essence the balloon, the message, was going to her. Another time was when my brother got married. He got married a few months after my mom passed away. So my sister-in-law lost her father years ago, and my brother mentioned my mom in their speech, and it was just a special moment where they acknowledged the loss, they acknowledged the love, but they also acknowledged the fact that they were there, present at that ceremony. Perhaps not in the traditional physical sense, but they were still very much there. They were being validated and honored, and even taking it towards the reception. There was an empty chair, and this is called the empty chair technique, where that chair was not to be occupied by anyone, and it actually had a picture in front of it of my brother and my mom, to pretty much, again, represent that that was her chair. Had she been here physically, she would have been sitting there, and even though she wasn't, she was still very much a part of the wedding. Another time when I graduated from my undergrad, I remember just having a conversation with my mom in my head during the ceremony, and I was just like letting her know exactly how I was feeling, letting her know that these achievements, these accomplishments, everything that I was doing up to that point was with her in mind and was with her very present, right? So I had to learn how to do it my way. I had to learn how to make my own path, but it was very much including her, and she was a part of it, and I was still honoring her, right? And even on the ordinary days where I miss her, where I want to talk to her, when I want to touch her, I want to hug her, I let her know that, either through spoken word, either through writing. I'm much more better in writing when I'm going out for a run and I just need to kind of have that space where it's just me and her and no distractions. So those are the ways that, again, I keep my connection alive with her, and don't feel pressured to go through these grand gestures, like to make a public display of, oh, look, I'm keeping my mom. No, that is something that should be between you and her, or you and your person that has passed away. It may be public, it may not be public. You may include other people, you may just include yourself, but understand that on a day-to-day basis, it's about you and the person. It's not about anyone else, but it's just about you and that person, how you can nurture this relationship now that it's on a different level. And yes, it's going to be different, it's going to feel different, and sometimes it's not going to feel like it's enough, and that's okay. Express it, say it, feel it, write it, draw it, run it, whatever, however you feel like you need to get it out, just get it out some way, somehow. Because again, when we keep those things inside, when we just marinate and ruminate and think about it, it feels and intensifies to a greater degree than if you just let it out. You're not letting it out for the expectation of it being resolved. You're letting it out for just being able to purge that out of your body, right? These are things that have helped me remain connected, and I feel like this is a much more realistic path, again, for me, in order to be able to make a new future, make a new life, make new goals, make new objectives, but still with my mom by my side. Well, not physically, but I have her with every decision that I make, every conflict, every emotion, every relationship, every challenge that life throws my way, and even every happy moment and peaceful moment. I have my mom very much present with me. And this is something that, again, I feel like it's more beneficial than having the notion of, you know, cutting them off from your life or leaving them behind, or as though they never existed, because they very much did exist. They did exist, and they made a mark, they made an impact, no matter how great or how small. So I hope that this message has resonated with you guys. And while these things will not take away from the pain, it will not take away your grief, it serves hopefully to at least help you move along through it, right? So it's like, how can we process through? How can we navigate through our grief and not feel like it's taking over us, or not feel like it literally is like pinning us to the floor with no help or support? So I'm sending a lot of love, a lot of light to everyone out there. I encourage you to share my videos with anyone that you feel like it may help or may resonate with. So if you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe to my channel, Life After Loss. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at _lifeafterloss. And if you would like to be a part of one of my videos or for questions or inquiries, please feel free to send me an email. Until the next.